Hi, I'm Joe Graydon.
I'm Terry Graydon. Welcome to this podcast of the People's Pharmacy, where we bring you the stories behind the health headlines.
This podcast is brought to you by Redix Industries, makers of Utterly Smooth Body Cream. 800-345-7339, on the web at uttercream.com. Have you ever made a New Year's resolution only to have it fade by February? Today we'll find out how to change our habits. This is the People's Pharmacy with Terry and Joe Graydon.
Getting rid of old habits that interfere with our health and happiness can be tough. Just ask anyone who's ever tried to quit smoking. Adopting new habits, like walking every day, can also be challenging, but there are practical ways to help us change our habits for the better.
Today we talk with author Gretchen Rubin. Her book is Better Than Before: What I Learned About Making and Breaking Habits to Sleep More, Quit Sugar, Procrastinate Less, and Generally Build a Happier Life.
Coming up on the People's Pharmacy, Gretchen Rubin shares her secrets on how you can become better than before.
First, the news.
In the People's Pharmacy health headlines, pancreatic cancer is rare, but it's a killer. Only about 8% of those diagnosed with this disease are still alive after 5 years. So news that people who took aspirin reduced their chance of developing pancreatic cancer is encouraging. The research was conducted in Shanghai, China, and compared 761 newly diagnosed pancreatic cancer patients to 794 cancer-free control subjects. They were interviewed about their health and habits, including smoking and aspirin use. The investigators found that 11% of the cancer patients were regular aspirin users, compared to 18% of the controls. This does not sound impressive, but the relative risk is. Regular aspirin use meant people were 46% less likely to be diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. The authors note that these data are consistent with those from other populations around the world. Aspirin use has also been associated with reduced risks of a variety of cancers, including those of the colon, stomach, esophagus, lung, breast, and prostate. Still, aspirin does have potential side effects that can be serious. These include bleeding ulcers or hemorrhagic strokes. Aspirin can also interact with other medications. Anyone contemplating using aspirin as a cancer preventive must consult a primary care provider first.
Investigators writing in the BMJ report that a nonsteroidal anti-inflammatory drug like ibuprofen reduces the risk of colorectal cancer. The authors analyzed data from 15 randomized controlled trials involving over 10,000 patients. The subjects had been diagnosed with colon polyps during colonoscopy. In the studies included in the analysis, various preventive agents were randomly compared to each other and to placebo. The trials then had people undergo colonoscopy at a later time to see whether they had developed additional colon polyps. Those taking an NSAID were least likely to develop further adenomatous polyps. Low-dose aspirin came in as the second-best choice, while calcium, vitamin D, folic acid, and high-dose aspirin were not as helpful. Regular NSAID use has risks, however. A gastroenterologist should be consulted about the benefit-risk ratio for such a prevention strategy.
Getting a good night's sleep can be an ongoing challenge. A recent survey conducted by Consumer Reports has found that a large number of people are taking over-the-counter sleep aids. That includes the antihistamine diphenhydramine found in most PM pain relievers. Almost 1 person out of 5 in the survey said they had used such a product over the last year. Of those, over 40% relied on them regularly for more than a year. Side effects of diphenhydramine include next-day drowsiness, dizziness, confusion, and constipation. Because diphenhydramine is an anticholinergic drug, there are concerns that regular use could affect cognitive function.
Tick bites can transmit a variety of serious diseases, including Lyme disease. This infection is caused by a germ called Borrelia. Most people wait until symptoms develop before seeking treatment. Now, Austrian researchers have developed a topical antibiotic gel containing azithromycin. When applied to the site of the tick bite within 3 days, it prevents Lyme infections. The study included more than 1,000 patients who were randomized to use the gel or a placebo every 12 hours over a period of 3 days. Of those who applied the antibiotic gel, none developed Lyme borreliosis. There were 7 infections in the control group. The investigators reported no complications with gel use.
An old mouthwash has just been found to help fight the bacteria that causes gonorrhea. Australian researchers tested Listerine Cool Mint and Total Care in both test tubes and men who had been diagnosed with this sexually transmitted disease. The alcohol-containing Listerine mouthwashes significantly reduced the growth of the bacteria responsible for gonorrhea. Although the original manufacturer of Listerine promoted its use against gonorrhea more than 100 years ago, evidence of effectiveness was lacking until now. The authors suggest that if these findings are confirmed, daily use of this affordable mouthwash could have significant public health benefits. And that's the health news from the People's Pharmacy this week. Welcome to the People's Pharmacy. I'm Terry Graydon.
And I'm Joe Graydon. Have you made New Year's resolutions to lose weight, exercise more, and be better in every way? Will your resolutions stick?
Today, we're talking with someone who can tell us how to change our habits for the better. Gretchen Rubin has written extensively about changing behavior. A prior book was The Happiness Project, or Why I Spent a Year Trying to Sing in the Morning, Clean My Closets, Fight Right, Read Aristotle, and generally have more fun. Her latest book is Better Than Before, What I Learned About Making and Breaking Habits to Sleep More, Quit Sugar, Procrastinate Less, and Generally Build a Happier Life. She blogs at GretchenRubin.com and hosts a popular weekly podcast, Happier with Gretchen Rubin.
Welcome to the People's Pharmacy, Gretchen Rubin.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be talking to you today.
Gretchen, habits are pretty far from your previous topic that you're well known for, which is happiness. How in the world did you get interested in anything as mundane as habits?
Well, see, to me, they seem very closely connected. And that's probably one of the reasons that I was excited to write a book about habits, because I have such positive associations with the idea of habits. But I got drawn into it because I had been researching and writing and talking to people for years about happiness. And I began to notice a pattern, which was that when they talked about a big happiness challenge they were facing, it was very often something to do with a problem with a habit. So somebody would say, well, my problem is that I'm exhausted all the time. And that's about the habit of getting enough sleep. Or someone would say, I'm frustrated because I really want to work on this novel in my free time and I never do. Well, that's about the habit of making consistent progress on a project. And so I became increasingly drawn to the question of how can we harness habits as a way to help us lead the healthier, happier, more productive lives that we want.
Gretchen, before we even get very far, let's find out, what do you even mean by habits? Because I think there are a lot of people who go, well, yeah, once I start eating the M&Ms, I can't stop. But
Yes.
It's so much more complicated than that. But on the simple side, help us understand your perspective. What do we mean when we say habits are the invisible architecture of everyday life?
Well, it's interesting because when you read discussions of habits, a lot of times there's emphasis on the idea of repetition or frequency or the familiarity of cues around a behavior. But I've really come to believe that the key aspect of habits and the reason that they can be energizing and freeing is decision-making, or really the lack of decision-making. Habits mean that we don't have to make decisions or use our self-control. And as we all know, it's very draining and demanding to use self-control or to make decisions. So I don't decide to get up at 6 a.m. I don't decide to skip dessert. I don't decide to go to my strength training class at 10 o'clock a.m. on Fridays because I made that decision a long time ago. It's on autopilot. And so when we have something as a habit, then we don't have to constantly revisit, and that can exhaust us. Sometimes people, when I talk about habits, they're like, well, you know what? I really do want to go through my day making healthy choices. And I say, no, you don't. Because every time you make a choice, you can make the wrong choice. Make one choice, stop choosing, put that behavior on the autopilot of habits, and life will get a lot easier.
So how do we turn something that we think we want to do, and we tell ourselves, yeah, I want to go to the gym. I really do, but it's cold, it's rainy, it's nasty out there. How do we make that autopilot?
Well, and that's the crucial question, right? So what I found is when I really started looking into how do people make and break habits, and use the same strategies whether you're making them or breaking them, I identified 21 different strategies that people can deploy to make and break habits. And sometimes, people think, 21, that's too many, give me 3. But what's good about the idea that there are 21 is that there's a lot to choose from, because some of these are available to us at some times, but not at other times. Some work for some people and not for others. And what I found is really the key step, and the step that so often is skipped, is that the most important thing to think about when you're trying to change a habit is, what are you like? What is true about you? Because, a lot of times the experts will say, well, the secret is to get up early and do it first thing in the morning, or to start small, or do it for 30 days, or to give yourself a cheat day. And those work for some people sometimes, but they don't work all the time for everyone. And the idea to get up and do something first thing in the morning, well, that's great advice for me because I'm a morning person. But if you're a night person who is at your most productive and creative and energetic later in the day, the idea that you're going to get up early and go for a run, you're not setting yourself up for success. That's not the kind of thing that's going to work for you. And so I think the first thing to do, and I spent a lot of time trying to understand what are the things we should try to understand about ourselves, our habit natures, so that then when we move forward to trying to figure out how to set those habits up, we really set ourselves up for success and not for frustration. Because most of us have tried and failed with an important habit, more than one time. It's that New Year's resolution that just keeps coming around.
Well, exactly. And you talk in the book about 4 different tendencies that people have. How do those fit into the habits, and what are they?
Well, the 4 tendencies, I was led to, they say there are 2 kinds of people in the world, the kind that like to divide people into 2 kinds of people and the kind who don't, and I'm definitely the kind who does. And one of the things that puzzled me as I was studying habits is there was no framework to understand people in relationship to each other. And there's sort of this unspoken assumption that, hey, if this works for me, it's going to work for you. We have the same aptitude for forming habits. We have the same attitude towards habits. And that just seemed to me to be plainly wrong. There seemed to be wide differences in how readily they formed habits and their view of habits. And so I wanted to develop a framework that would put this into context so that we could understand how different people responded. So you're a doctor and you want people to take their blood pressure medication. Some people do it, some people don't. Why or why not? So the 4 tendencies has to do with how a person meets an expectation. And so there are outer expectations like a work deadline or a request from a spouse. And then there are inner expectations, which is your own desire to keep a New Year's resolution or your own desire to get back into playing the guitar. And so there are upholders, questioners, obligers, and rebels.
Whoa, say that again. Okay. That went really fast.
Yeah, okay. So they're upholders, questioners, obligers, and rebels. So upholders readily meet outer and inner expectations alike. They keep a work deadline. They keep a New Year's resolution without much fuss. They don't need deadlines or supervision. They really want to meet the expectations that are placed on them, but their expectation for themselves are just as important.
And if I may say so, that's not me.
That's not you. Okay, that is me. That's my tendency.
Well, I think there are a lot of us who, if we have an appointment at 2 o'clock with a friend or perhaps a business acquaintance, we're going to be there at 2 o'clock. We're going to meet that expectation.
Okay, and that's an outer expectation.
Yeah. But when it comes to ourselves, we're not always so good about that.
Exactly. So questioners question all expectations. They'll do something if they think it makes sense. So they don't want to do anything inefficient or arbitrary. And so their first question is, why am I doing this at all? So they can do something if it meets their standards. So in a way, they make everything an inner expectation. And then there's the people that you were just talking about. People who readily meet outer expectations but struggle to meet inner expectations. Those are obligers. And I got my first glimpse into the obliger tendency when a friend of mine said, the weird thing about me is when I was in high school, I was on the track team, and I never missed track practice. But I can't go running now. Why? I thought, well, why? Well, because when she had a team and a coach waiting for her, she had no trouble doing it. But when it was just her own expectation, she struggled. Obliger. And by the way, obliger is the biggest tendency. That's the one that has the most people in it. And then finally, rebel. That's the smallest tendency. Rebels resist all expectations, outer and inner alike. They want to do what they want to do in their own way, when they want to do it. And if you ask or tell them to do something, they're very likely to resist. They don't even want to tell themselves what to do. So it's a lot. These are the 4 tendencies. But it makes a big difference because if you're trying to get somebody, like you're trying to get somebody to do physical therapy for their knee, the way that you talk about it with them, or you're a teacher trying to get somebody to hand in a book report on Friday, the way that you frame it is going to make a big difference in how that person reacts to that expectation. And for yourself, if you're trying to get yourself to bring lunch from home every day, or go to the gym, or hand in your weekly report on time, how do you think about what you need to set things up in a way that's going to allow you to succeed? Well, your tendency is a big, big clue into the kinds of things that are going to work for you.
Well, I think that's really insightful because the rebel, for example, as you said, is just not going to do it until you explain why. But if you explain why and you make it a compelling why, then there's a good chance the rebel will do it.
Well, and that's even more true of questioners, because questioners, their first question is, why am I listening to you and why am I going to do what you expect? Yeah, absolutely. So you need to think about reasons, justifications. And sometimes that can be very draining. Many people, questioners are wonderful to have around because they love information, they love research. It's very healthy to have somebody being like, "What?" In an organization, why are we bothering to do this at all? But it can be draining and difficult to manage, and they can also be seen to be uncooperative or undermining because they're questioning, and they don't mean it to be. They just want to understand, and once they understand, they're right there with you. But you need to get them there if you want them to stay with the program.
And that sounds like it would be equally important for a partner. If you don't understand where they're coming from, they may not get on board.
Well, I'm an upholder married to a questioner, and that's absolutely, I've learned that lesson. And it's made actually my marriage much, much kind of easier because now I realize sometimes, I would ask my husband to do something, and he'd be like, well, why should I? And not because he was a jerk. And now I understand it's just, he's like that with everybody. It's not just with me. He's always like, well, why should I? And so I just have to tell him why I think he should. And if I have a reason, then he'll do it. And so I don't take it the wrong way anymore. And I'm also quick to supply my reasons because I have reasons. And he needs to hear them if he's going to meet that expectation.
You're listening to Gretchen Rubin, author of Better Than Before, What I Learned About Making and Breaking Habits to Sleep More, Quit Sugar, Procrastinate Less, and Generally Build a Happier Life. She blogs daily at GretchenRubin.com and hosts a weekly podcast, Happier with Gretchen Rubin.
After the break, we'll hear Gretchen's story about how a book that offered a lightning bolt of insight changed her diet overnight.
How can we identify strategies that will work for us in establishing healthy new habits this year?
How do you figure out which habits will be most helpful and what strategies will help you incorporate them into your life? Maybe we could start by making our desired behaviors more convenient and making the ones we don't want less convenient.
You're listening to The People's Pharmacy with Joe and Terry Graydon.
If you value the health information you get when you listen to The People's Pharmacy, consider subscribing to our email newsletter. You'll get the latest health news and information on upcoming podcasts delivered to your inbox twice a week. Look for the link at peoplespharmacy.com.
Welcome back to the People's Pharmacy. I'm Terry Graydon.
And I'm Joe Graydon. The People's Pharmacy is made possible in part by Redx Industries, makers of utterly smooth creams and lotions that deeply moisturize to make dry skin feel soft and smooth. The number is 800-345-7339. The website is uttercream.com.
And by Squatty Potty, the original toilet footstool that creates healthy toilet posture. You can learn how squatting relaxes the colon and allows for easier, healthier elimination at squattypotty.com.
If you'd like to order a CD of this show, you can call 800-732-2334. This is show 1018. That phone number again, 800-732-2334, online at peoplespharmacy.com.
Today on the People's Pharmacy, we're talking about mastering the habits of our everyday lives. Do you want to unclutter your desk? Would you like to exercise regularly and lose a few pounds? How can you set yourself up for success? Many of us may have made New Year's resolutions. What can we do to keep them this year and really make them a part of our lives?
To help us with practical strategies for changing our habits, we're talking with Gretchen Rubin. She's written extensively about how we can change our behavior. A prior book was The Happiness Project, or Why I Spent a Year Trying to Sing in the Morning, Clean My Closets, Fight Right, Read Aristotle, and Generally Have More Fun. Her latest book is Better Than Before: What I Learned About Making and Breaking Habits to Sleep More, Quit Sugar, Procrastinate Less, and Generally Build a Happier Life. She blogs at GretchenRubin.com and hosts a popular weekly podcast, Happier with Gretchen Rubin.
Gretchen, you tell a very interesting story about a strategy that happened to you, and I say happened because it's not a strategy you can set out planning to use necessarily, and that is the strategy of the lightning bolt. You talk about a lot of different strategies in Better Than Before, but the strategy of the lightning bolt is especially fascinating. So tell us about it, please.
Yeah, you're exactly right. The strategy of the lightning bolt is very different from the other strategies, because the other strategies we can set out to consciously use and take advantage of. But the strategy of the lightning bolt it hits you like a lightning bolt. It's almost something that happens to you. You cannot make it happen. It's an experience that you go through. And what it is that sometimes we're hit by an idea. We get a new piece of information. Our knowledge changes. Our beliefs change. Or some experience triggers us. And overnight, we're able to change an important habit in a flash because something has hit us like a lightning bolt. And sometimes it can be a bad report from a doctor, or, finding out that you're pregnant, or a birthday, or a casual comment from a friend. And in my case, I had a very dramatic lightning bolt because I went on spring break with my in-laws and my family, which we do every spring, and I had thrown in my bag this book by Gary Taubes called Why We Get Fat. And I was interested in the book because my sister is a type 1 diabetic. And so I'd always been interested in insulin. And when I flipped through the book in the bookstore, I saw that there was a lot of discussion of insulin. So I was intrigued. So I read this book, Why We Get Fat, and overnight I completely changed everything about the way that I ate except for leafy green vegetables and like chicken. Those were like the only things that I continued to eat the same way. Everything else about the way that I ate changed because my beliefs had changed. What I considered to be healthy changed. And, and I think the thing that's interesting about this is because I think we think of eating habits as being among the most intractable. And when people talk about changing their eating habits, they think about making small substitutions or gradual changes. And to just completely change your habits overnight might seem like impossible under what a lot of people think of habits as how they work. And for me, it was effortless.
Why do you suppose it was so effortless?
Because I was just absolutely convinced. Like, as I was reading Why We Get Fat, I just saw argument after argument that was answering questions that had always bothered me. There were, historical examples that were explained. There were things from my own experience that made sense. There were questions that I'd always had that I had never been satisfied with the answer. And, and the thing that's interesting about Tops is he's really talking about insulin. And insulin is very well understood. It was discovered decades ago. It's life and death importance to a lot of people. So it's well researched, well known. And it made so much sense to me that I was like, of course I'm going to have to. I want to eat in a way. If I want to be healthy, I should eat in a way that's going to require my body to produce less insulin. And then it's like, okay, well, what do you eat if you want your body to have to produce less insulin? Well, it's very clear. And I just did it. And then, of course, one of the things that helped me with my lightning bolt is I immediately saw good effect on myself. Now, one time I was telling somebody about this and they were like, well, Gretchen, I mean, come on, that's not very scientific. You're a data point of 1. And I said, yeah, but I'm the only data point I care about. I mean, if I'm getting a good result, that's very compelling to me. And it's interesting because my father kind of followed along. He's a questioner, so he read all the stuff that I was reading and was reading all this research, and he also had a great result. And so our beliefs changed, and then our experience confirmed what we believed, and so that's very, very compelling. And so it was sort of an effortless change to make in a very, very deep, pervasive habit of life.
Gretchen, you talk about how important it is to understand ourselves so that we can then find the habits that are going to work for us.
Right.
So help us understand, one, how do we do that? And then number two, what are the strategies that you've found over the years to be most effective for most people, recognizing that everybody's different?
Well, I try to identify a lot of different things where people might understand themselves better in terms of how their habits play out. So, for instance, I mentioned this earlier, morning people or night people. This is a real thing. As a morning person, I used to think that night people could become morning people if they just went to bed earlier. No, it's a product largely of genetics and also age. And so you've got to respect that. If you're going to do your habits, you want to set yourself up for success. And then there are other distinctions, like when it comes to habits of work pace. This is often a subject of conflict in offices or teams. There are marathoners, and marathoners like a work pace which involves starting early and doing consistent work a little bit at a time and having plenty of room at the end. They don't like to come up against a deadline. So they're like, of the tortoise and the hare, they're like the tortoise. They slow and steady. And then there are the sprinters. They love the adrenaline of the deadline. They like working intense, long hours, like right up against the end. They feel like that's what makes them creative and productive. And if they start too early, they kind of burn out or lose interest or waste time. And it's not that one way or the other is correct. It's just that people have different ways that they like to work. But it can be a problem when you have teams or when you have someone leading a team. My sister's a TV writer, and she worked for somebody who was a sprinter. She's a marathoner. And this showrunner, who's like the boss of TV writers, would deliberately manufacture situations so that there would be these sudden deadlines that everybody had to sprint toward. And it made her crazy because she didn't like to work that way. But for him, that was the way he thought everybody did their best work. And so when you understand a difference like that, or another difference that comes up in the workplace is, and also at home, everywhere, is, are you a simplicity lover or an abundance lover? Simplicity lovers tend to like, empty surfaces, clean walls, quiet, few choices. Abundance lovers like buzz and a lot of profusion choices, lots going on. And again, at home, at work, you can see how it might shape the kind of habits and the kind of environments in which you would thrive. And again, it's not that one person's right and one person's wrong, or like we'd all be happier if there was nothing on the wall, or we had a clean desk, or if there was a lot on the wall. It's just a question of understanding yourself and saying, like, well, how do I do my best work, or how do I feel the best? And if other people are different from me, how do we get to a place where we can both thrive? So I try to lay out a lot of distinctions like that.
So once you understand, how things work for you, how do you develop strategies that are going to be most effective for creating, the positive habits that we want? And perhaps not distinguishing, and perhaps extinguishing the habits that we want to get rid of?
Well, that's really the $1 million question. Like, given who you are, what your circumstances are, what do you do? Like, what strategies do you do? And what I found is really when you're trying to change an important habit, you might use many strategies simultaneously to change that habit. But there are some strategies, as you mentioned earlier, that are pretty pervasive, that work for just about everyone. For example, the strategy of convenience. To a crazy degree, we are just much more likely to do something if it's convenient. And the more convenient it is, the more likely we are to do it. And there's also the twin strategy, which is inconvenient. The less convenient something is, the less likely we are to do it. And you can use this to your advantage. So, for instance, if you want to stop checking your phone so much once you get home from work, okay, if you keep your phone in your back pocket, you're going to be checking that thing constantly because you just can't resist. But if you say, okay, I'm going to put it, in my bag on a high shelf in the closet, and I'm going to shut the closet door. So if I get sweaty and panicky because I got to check my cell phone, I can. It's there. But I'm going to have to really go out of my way to get to it. That inconvenience is just going to help you break down that habit. It's going to be a bar that if you're thinking to yourself consciously, I've been working on this habit of not checking my phone, that's making it inconvenient is going to be better. Same thing with convenience. If you make it, if you're thinking, I wonder if I should join the gym that's right across the street from my office, or maybe I should save a few bucks and do one that's, it's just 3 blocks away. No. If you can afford it, spring for the one that's right across the street because that little bit of convenience, every little bit of convenience matters. They've done funny research with things like if there's a salad bar and there's tongs instead of spoons, people take less because it's just that much harder to get food with tongs than with spoons. People take less food. So any kind of, you can really tinker with, strengthen and weaken good habits and bad habits, respectively, with convenience. And another strategy that we all need to use is the strategy of loophole spotting. And I have to say, this is the funniest strategy. I had the most fun researching this strategy. And we're all like these amazing advocates for ourselves. We're constantly coming up for reasons like, oh yeah, well, I'm totally committed to my good habit. But just this once, right now, there's this thing. It just occurred to me. It's too cold. It's my birthday. I've been so good. I deserve to be bad. I deserve to be bad because I'm going to be so good tomorrow. Other people's feelings will be hurt if I don't join in. And there's 10 different categories of loopholes. And most of us have a few favorites. So if you think about the loopholes that you tend to invoke, then when they're starting to rush through your mind, almost, under your level of consciousness, you can say to yourself, hang on, I might be invoking a loophole. Do I really want to let myself off the hook now? And often just realizing that you're invoking a loophole helps people break that cycle of letting themselves off the hook.
Well, it turns out that there's been recent research showing that people who bring their recycled bags to the grocery store to save the environment, then give themselves permission, because they've been so good, to buy junk food, whether it's, ice cream or potato chips or whatever it is. They buy something that they wouldn't have bought otherwise and there's that loophole because they've been so good.
That's the moral licensing loophole. Absolutely. And it's very powerful. And that's another reason why habits can be powerful, because when something's a habit, do you give yourself a little treat every time you brush your teeth? Do you feel like you deserve to buy a special snack every time you put on your seatbelt? No. You just do that stuff because that's your habit. It doesn't earn you anything. And so that's another reason why when things are habits, then hopefully you can start getting away from that moral licensing, because you don't feel like it's an exceptional thing that deserves a reward, or that you get a special treat for doing it. It's just the thing that you do. But you're right, moral licensing, it's something that is very, very popular loophole.
So, Gretchen, I need help, okay? I'm in real trouble because I've got a habit that I've got to break. It's driving me crazy.
I'm wondering which one this is.
Which one this is?
Yeah, okay. There are several, but
some of his habits drive me crazy, but they don't bother him. It's okay.
But this one drives me crazy. I file by pile. So I've got paper everywhere. If you looked at my desk, you would shudder. Well, you'd probably shriek. And the only time I ever clean up is when the computer guy is coming by to work on my computer, because I'm so embarrassed by so much paper.
And he's an obliger.
Okay.
Yeah. So
that's good information.
Yeah. So I make this last minute, kind of deadline. Oh, he's going to be here in 45 minutes. I better clean up my desk so he can actually do what needs to be done to fix my computer. And so I put everything in a big box and I store it away, and then I never see it again. So, but I think all that paper is really important. and I can't throw it out, even though I'm never going to look at it. So Terry's laughing.
I'm laughing because I have a strategy to deal with these boxes.
They disappear because I never see them again.
I go through them. He's obviously described a sprinter strategy, and I'm a marathoner. And so I go through his boxes, 2 or 3 pieces of paper at a time, look at them carefully, decide whether or not they need to be filed someplace we can find them or not. And if not, the recycling gets a little bit heavier.
But right now, because the computer guy hasn't been by in several months, there's paper sky high on every available surface. I don't want to do this. I don't like it, but I can't help myself. How do I change this habit?
Okay, well, there's a couple of habits that you might try. One is the 1-minute rule. Anything that you can do in less than a minute, you do without delay. So if you can print something out and file it, you do it right away. If you can look at a letter and throw it away, you do it right away. You don't set it aside because you have a minute to figure out what you're going to do with it, so you don't delay. So anything that is sort of a snap judgment like that, you do immediately. So that gets rid of sort of a layer. Another thing that you might think about trying is something that I've had really good success with, which is Power Hour. For 1 hour a week, I do any kind of non-repetitive task because you can't be in the habit of like going to the hardware store to buy that weird light bulb because you only do it once every 3 years. But so maybe your power hour is that for 1 hour a week, you're going to just do filing. And here's the thing about something like that. If you're setting aside time for any kind of work or any kind of task, you have to do that task or nothing. You cannot also be checking your emails or talking on the phone or doing research or anything else. It's like if you're going to set aside an hour to deal with your paperwork, you're going to do that for an hour or you're going to just like stare at the ceiling. Because out of sheer boredom, during that hour, you will do that work because there's nothing else to do. It sounds like to some degree you've outsourced your problem. Maybe you can get somebody else to do it. Maybe it can be somebody else's job description that they do it. Also, if you're an obliger, you're going to be very sensitive to external accountability. So maybe you want to say to somebody, I want you to come through my office every week and really give me a hard time if it looks messy. Or maybe you want to manufacture a thing where somebody's coming to your office where you would be embarrassed, because knowing that somebody's going to come by is something that can help keep you on top of it. But it needs to be regular because, like you say, if it sort of gets worse and worse and worse, then it gets more and more difficult to deal with. And it's interesting. There's sort of an essential 7 of habit formation. And one of the 7 is like clean, clear, organize, recycle, like getting rid of stuff. And those kinds of habits are much easier when they're consistent and small and regular, because if you let it all pile up for months, then you feel like you're going to have to take a week off of work to deal with it. And that's not very realistic. So you want to do something that's consistent and regular. So that's some of my suggestions.
You're listening to Gretchen Rubin. She's best known for her previous book, The Happiness Project, or Why I Spent a Year Trying to Sing in the Morning, Clean My Closets, Fight Right, Read Aristotle, and Generally Have More Fun. Her latest book is Better Than Before, What I Learned About Making and Breaking Habits to Sleep More, Quit Sugar, Procrastinate Less, and Generally Build a Happier Life. She blogs at GretchenRubin.com and hosts a weekly podcast, Happier with Gretchen Rubin.
When we come back, we'll get Gretchen Rubin's recommendations on how we can change our habits just in time to figure out how to keep our resolutions this year.
We'll get advice about several of her favorite strategies, like scheduling and monitoring.
We'll also learn how other people affect our habits, both good and bad, and how we can turn that to our advantage.
You're listening to The People's Pharmacy with Joe and Terry Graydon. Thanks for listening to this podcast of The People's Pharmacy. If you like it, why not rate or review it in the iTunes store? We'd appreciate it.
Welcome back to The People's Pharmacy. I'm Joe Graydon.
And I'm Terry Graydon. The People's Pharmacy is brought to you in part by Squatty Potty, the original toilet footstool that creates healthy toilet posture. You can learn how squatting relaxes the colon and allows for easier and healthier elimination at squattypotty.com.
And by Red X Industries, makers of utterly smooth foot cream with shea butter, helping dry, cracked feet feel soft and smooth. The number is 800-345-7339. The website is uttercream.com.
If you would like to purchase a CD of today's show or any other People's Pharmacy broadcast, you can call 800-732-2334. Today's show is number 1018. That number again, 800-732-2334, or place your order online at peoplespharmacy.com.
Today we're talking with Gretchen Rubin, host of the podcast Happier with Gretchen Rubin. She's author of Better Than Before, What I Learned About Making and Breaking Habits to Sleep More, Quit Sugar, Procrastinate Less, and Generally Build a Happier Life.
Gretchen, can you offer us any recommendations on how to change habits? Let's say that someone has a habit that they don't like and they want to swap it. They know what they want to do instead, but it can be really hard to make that change. What sorts of strategies are available to people to make a change?
Well, again, there are 21 different strategies, and I love them all. They're all effective and powerful. But there are 4 sort of pillars of habit change, which are the strategies that are the most popular, and they're tremendously effective. One is the strategy of monitoring. So it turns out that to kind of an uncanny degree, if we monitor something, we start to do a better job of it, even if we're not consciously trying to change our behavior, whether that's how many steps we take in a day, what we eat, how much we spend, how many times we lose our temper. There's just something about monitoring that helps get people closer to where they want to go. And then it also gives you a much more realistic picture because, no surprise, research shows that people tend to very much overestimate the good habits that we're practicing and underestimate how much we're violating our good habits. And so monitoring just keeps you knowing what you're actually doing. So and any kind of monitoring is very helpful.
So this is the idea that you can't change what you don't measure.
Exactly. You manage what you monitor. And this is true of even if there's something that you feel like, well, I can't really, like, what about like spending time with my child? I can't monitor that. Well, it's like, well, you might say to yourself, I want to spend more time with my child. That's pretty abstract. Maybe I want to say I want my habit to be that I'm going to read a story to my child every night before bed. And I'm going to check that off in my calendar every night. How many times? Okay, a week went by. How many times did I do it? Oh, I did it 5 out of 7. That's pretty good. This week I did 2 out of 7. That's not so good, So now you've given yourself something to monitor. It's a concrete behavior that you can actually keep track of. And the next one is foundation, the strategy of foundation. And it comes from the observation that there are certain habits that we need to give a special respect to because they go directly to self-command. And self-command is precious. That's what we all want all the time, is to be in command of ourselves. And certain areas go right to self-command. And so you want to pay very special attention to try to get these things nailed down first. One is eating and drinking right. So you don't want to let yourself get too hungry. Funnily enough, one reason that people overeat or eat the wrong stuff is they've let themselves get too hungry. You skip breakfast, you skip lunch, and then it's just, you're eating everything in the fridge. Drinking lowers inhibitions. That's part of what's fun about it. It's not good for your good habits. Next, sleep. Most adults need at least 7 hours of sleep. If you don't get enough sleep, your self-command is going to go down, and you're going to really find it much more difficult to stick to those good habits. Moving around. You do not need to train for the marathon. Just some exercise really boosts memory, immune function, self-command, really energizes us, and then that helps us keep our good habits. And then weirdly, uncluttering. We were just talking about cluttering. For many people, outer order contributes to a sense of inner calm and inner self-command. And somebody once told me, I finally cleaned my fridge, and now I know I can switch careers. And I know exactly how that felt, It's like there's something, it seems like a trivial thing to like clean out your desk. But over and over people say that that's something that really
no, it's not a trivial thing for some of us. It's a very big thing.
Yeah, but you think, a crowded coat closet, is that going to how's that going to make a difference in a happy life? But it's something that can really weigh us down. So that's the strategy of foundation. And then there's the strategy of scheduling. Now, the strategy of scheduling is that for most people, If something appears on the schedule, they're just much more likely to do it. If it says like, oh, I'm going to go to the gym, or like if you think to yourself, I'm going to go to the gym sometime today, you very likely might not get there. But if it says go to the gym at noon, there's something about seeing it there, you know exactly when it's slotted in. There just creates this expectation that you're going to stick to that habit. And so if you're trying to have a habit of anything, if you want to read for fun, put it on your calendar every Saturday afternoon, because that's going to help you stick to it. But there's an important caution. For rebels, the few, the proud, the rebels, scheduling actually makes things worse for them, because if they see something on the schedule, they will tend to resist it. And so for rebels, do not use the strategy of scheduling. It will not work for you. But for just about everybody else, the strategy of scheduling is powerful.
So that's really why it's so important to understand ourselves. I mean, in
Yes.
my case particularly, scheduling is really crucial. If it's on the
there you go.
calendar,
Yes.
I'm going to do it. If
Right.
it's not on the calendar, probably not. And I'm almost a slave to my calendar, whereas I can just not even conceive of that rebel who's going to go, nah,
Right.
I'm going to resist that. Because, like, for me, no, it's there. I'm going to do it.
Well, and then that's a very important thing to know about yourself, because there might be things that you wouldn't ordinarily put on your calendar, but that you might want to put on your calendar to help reinforce the habit. Like you might have like cell phone free zone 6 to 9 p.m. and you'd actually put that on your calendar. And you're like, oh, I'm in my cell phone free zone now. And the final kind of the 4 pillars of habit change is accountability. And for just about everyone, accountability really helps. I mean, deadlines. I mean, this is why we have attendance records when we're little kids, because when you know someone's holding you accountable or you're holding yourself accountable, we tend to do a better job. That really works. And here's the key thing about the strategy of accountability. For obligers, external accountability is the crucial tool for them. That is the thing that can allow them to meet an inner expectation. They cannot meet an inner expectation, but if they find a way to give themselves outer accountability for that inner expectation, then they can meet it. And so for obligers, accountability is really the foremost habit strategy for them to think about.
So as an example, you write in Better Than Before about a writer, a friend of yours,
Yes.
who signed a book contract, and she said to her editor, you need to give me deadlines because that's how I work. I'll meet the deadline, but let's not leave it until the very end when the book is due. Okay? But her
Right.
editor didn't pay attention. So he didn't give her deadlines during the course of the time, and all of a sudden, the book was due, and she had to write it in like 3 weeks. We know a little something about this. We do love deadlines because it really helps us get our work done.
Yes, and what's interesting about that illustration is that for other people and other tendencies, accountability doesn't always matter as much. So I'm an upholder. There are not that many upholders. It's a very small tendency. We don't need a lot of accountability. But it's very helpful for me to realize now that I understand the 4 tendencies. If somebody ever asks me to hold them accountable, I absolutely should do it, or I should help them find another way to hold themselves accountable. If someone knows they need accountability, don't push back. Don't tell them, oh, no, like that editor that you mentioned who was like, oh, it's going to be great. Like, just let your genius flower. I know it's going to be amazing. And no, she knows what she needs. And so these systems of accountability are very, very crucial for obligers. And sometimes obligers haven't quite figured this out. And so I think that's why it's helpful to know the tendencies, because then you can say, this is the missing piece. Like my friend who didn't understand why she could run when she was in high school but couldn't run now. Because now I would say to her, you need to work out with a friend or join a class or work out with a trainer or join an accountability group or use a device where you're join a group online where everybody checks in or whatever it is that's going to work for you. But there needs to be that outer accountability because that's what's going to allow you to follow through for yourself.
Gretchen, why is it that sometimes it seems so hard to create a habit for something that we really like to do, really want to do, but we somehow can't make it part of our routine?
Well, that was one of the big mysteries for me when I was starting this book, because it's easy to understand why you might find it difficult to form a habit of something you don't like to do. But so often people would say to me, oh, I love to go bike riding. Why can't I go bike riding? And I'd be like, why can't you go bike riding? Like, you love to go bike riding. And I think a lot of times when people talk about that, it's because it's an obliger who's trying to meet an inner expectation of something that they enjoy. So they really need to give themselves outer accountability. And because upholders, questioners, and rebels don't experience that in the same way. But obligers, the biggest tendency, and so that's a lot of people who feel that way. And one of the things that I love is I've heard from so many obligers about the ingenious ways that they have gone about giving themselves external accountability for something they enjoy doing. So, for instance, a guy was like, oh, I really love going to basketball games, but I never went. But then I got season tickets with my brother, and he gets really annoyed if I don't go. So now I go all the time. Because now he's got an outer accountability. Or someone said, oh, I never got any exercise, so I decided I would join a women's soccer team. And now I get tons of exercise, plus I have all these new friends because I can't let the team down. Or another, like somebody who said, I really wanted to get up early. Like my day is so much better when I get up early, but then every morning I live by myself, and every morning I would find myself just hitting the snooze, the snooze, the snooze. So what she did is she went on to Hootsuite, which is a social media management platform, and made a very embarrassing Facebook post and set it to post every morning at 8:15 a.m. So she has to get up early so she can disable it. I was like, that is brilliant.
That is brilliant.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes. And two people were telling me at their office they wanted to bring healthy food from home, but they never did. They were always like saying, we should, but then they'd go out for fast food. So they decided to do a salad swap, and half the time one person brings a healthy lunch that they've made at home, and half the time the other person does. And when you bring me lunch, I have to eat it because you made it for me. And when it's my turn, I have to make it because you're depending on me to give you lunch. And so it sort of works both directions. And so once you sort of see that that's the key piece, I mean, obligers have just such an imaginative way of approaching this, but you have to understand that that's the problem that needs to be solved. And once you figure that part out, then because obligers are outstanding at meeting outer expectations. So once they have that locked in, they can follow through.
Gretchen, how do other people affect our habits, our ability to keep good habits, or our ability to change bad habits?
Well, I mean, the strategy of other people it's huge. I mean, you've put your finger on just extraordinarily big issue because we're affecting each other all the time. We're trading habits back and forth. I'm affecting you, you're affecting me. The institutions that we're part of, the organizations that we go to, the rooms that we're in, all of these things are affecting our habits. And, they can affect us for the better. So if you want to change a habit, you want to be hanging out with people who have the good behavior that you want to emulate. And, if you have a bad habit, you want to avoid the people who are doing it because those habits are going to really rub off on you. And now the thing about other people that can be discouraging is sometimes people are very helpful and they really go out of their way to support a good habit or a change in habit. And sometimes people are indifferent and they don't do anything one way or another. But sometimes, and it's not that uncommon, the people around us are not helpful. They might actually be discouraging or, maybe because if you change a habit, it might make them feel guilty about their own habits. It might make them feel jealous because they see that you're getting a result that they wish they had, but they don't want to put in the effort to change the habit. It might inconvenience them. They're like, you know what? I like to sleep late on Saturday and Sunday. I don't really particularly appreciate you getting up at 9 o'clock a.m. to go for a run and whatever. And so I think it's very helpful to be aware of and to really think through how other people are influencing us for the better and for the worse. Because often, if you're not really conscious of it, it's easy to just fall into step with whatever they're doing. But if you're really thinking about what you want, then it's easier. And what I found, too, is that it's difficult sometimes to go in opposition of what somebody else wants. But the clearer we are about what we want and why we're doing it, the easier it is to do our own thing. So, for instance, let's say you have been wanting to quit sugar. And you walk into the office and your office mate says, oh, come on, what's one cupcake? You've been so good. You deserve it. And I brought these from home. I baked them myself. I made them for you. That's 3 loopholes right there. She's offering you to eat the cupcake. But when you think, you know what? I appreciate that you made them. And yeah, 1 cupcake is not big a deal, but today I'm not going to have that cupcake because I've really decided that I'm going to have a different kind of habit. And I'm clear with what I expect for myself and why I want that. It's easier. It's not always easy, but it's easier to keep our own habits even in the face of other people's indifference or actual discouragement.
Gretchen, I wonder if you can summarize for us how our listeners can use the idea of habits, of being able to establish habits to make their lives better and presumably happier?
Well, research suggests that about 40% of everyday life is shaped by habits. And so if we have habits that work for us, we're much more likely to be happier, healthier, and more productive. And if our habits don't work for us, that's just going to be a lot more elusive. And so, even for people who have sort of an antipathy to habits, I think come around to seeing how they can be these powerful drivers of change and how they can really help to get all of us where we want to go. But the secret is always to start with what is true for us, so that we shape those habits in a way that's going to allow us to succeed. Because, just because something worked for Steve Jobs or our sister-in-law doesn't mean that it's going to work for us. Maybe that's how we get a good idea. But we're often better off thinking about things like, well, when have I succeeded in the past? What was different about the past? Why could I do it then and I'm struggling now? How can I recreate those conditions? And how can I think about using all the different strategies that are available to me to think about how I could change that behavior? Because I think people get really discouraged because if they've tried and failed, but a lot of times they didn't set it up in a way that was right for them. And so there really is possibility when we start by thinking about what's true about ourselves.
Gretchen Rubin, thank you so much for talking with us on the People's Pharmacy today.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. It was great to talk to you.
You've been listening to Gretchen Rubin. She's written extensively about changing our behaviors. Her previous books include The Happiness Project, or Why I Spent a Year Trying to Sing in the Morning, Clean My Closets, Fight Right, Read Aristotle, and Generally Have More Fun, and Happier at Home, Kiss More, Jump More, Abandon a Project, Read Samuel Johnson, and My Other Experiments in the Practice of Everyday Life. Her latest book is Better Than Before, What I Learned About Making and Breaking Habits to Sleep More, Quit Sugar, Procrastinate Less, and Generally Build a Happier Life. She blogs at GretchenRubin.com and hosts a weekly podcast, Happier with Gretchen Rubin.
We wish you a happy and healthy 2016 that's better than ever. Next week, we talk with Dr. Wendy Wood, who has done research on how we can change habits, and we invite you to share your own success stories. What strategies have you employed to incorporate healthy habits into your life? Email us, radio@peoplespharmacy.com, or call in your story next week.
Lynn Siegel produced today's show. Russ Henry engineered it. Dave Graydon edits our interviews.
The People's Pharmacy is produced at the studios of North Carolina Public Radio, WUNC.
The People's Pharmacy theme music is by B.J. Liederman.
The People's Pharmacy is made possible by Redx Industries, makers of Utterly Smooth Extra Care 20 Cream with 20% urea for extra skin protection. The number's 800-345-7339, online at uttercream.com.
And if you would like to order a CD of today's show or purchase any other People's Pharmacy broadcast, you can call 800-732-2334. Today's show is number 1018. That number again, 800-732-2334. Or you can find it online at peoplespharmacy.com.
When you visit our website, you can check out information on prescription drugs, herbal medicines, and home remedies. Share your own experience and your thoughts on today's show.
At the website, you can also sign up for our free online newsletter or the free podcast of the show. You need never miss another People's Pharmacy program, and you could share it with a friend. It's all there at peoplespharmacy.com.
In Durham, North Carolina, I'm Joe Graydon.
And I'm Terry Graydon. Thank you for listening. Please join us again next week.
We hope you enjoyed this podcast. If so, please consider taking a minute to write a review on iTunes. And thanks for listening to the People's Pharmacy.